Imagine living inside a floating steel city. More than 300 sailors, 3 meals a day, thousands of gallons of fresh water, hundreds of showers. Laundry is running constantly. Medical facilities, machine shops, kitchens, bathrooms, everything a small town needs. Except one thing. There are no garbage trucks, no landfills, no sewer system, and nowhere to simply throw everything away. Yet every single day, a U.S. Navy destroyer produces hundreds of pounds of trash, food waste, sewage, used oil, plastics, cardboard, and hazardous materials. If that waste isn't managed correctly, it doesn't just create bad smells, it can threaten health, damage expensive equipment, violate international law, and even compromise an entire deployment. So where does it all go? Do destroyers dump garbage into the ocean? Can sailors really flush anything overboard? What happens to human waste when you're hundreds of miles from land? Today, Maranata, we're taking you behind the scenes of one of the least glamorous but most important jobs aboard a U.S. Navy destroyer. Because winning at sea isn't just about missiles. Sometimes it's about taking out the trash. Modern destroyers are marvels of engineering, but they're also floating communities carrying more than 300 people for months at a time. That means producing enormous amounts of waste every single day. From leftover food and packaging to sewage and hazardous chemicals, every type of waste must be carefully managed without harming the crew or the environment. In this video, we'll explore how U.S. Navy destroyers handle the surprising challenge of keeping a floating city clean while operating thousands of miles from shore. When people think about destroyers, they usually picture missile launchers, powerful radar systems, helicopters, and advanced weapons. Few ever think about garbage. Yet waste management is one of the most important daily operations aboard every modern warship. A destroyer normally carries between 300 and 330 sailors, depending on the ship and its mission. Every one of those sailors eats 3 meals a day, drinks fresh water, showers, washes clothes, opens packages, performs maintenance, and goes about daily life. Just like a city on land, all of those activities create waste. Every breakfast leaves behind food scraps. Every delivery arrives wrapped in cardboard and plastic. Every repair creates worn parts, oily rags, metal scraps, and used equipment. Even routine medical care generates waste that must be handled correctly. Unlike ashore, however, there's nowhere to simply wheel a dumpster out to the curb. Everything produced aboard must either be processed, stored, recycled, or disposed of according to strict regulations. Space aboard a destroyer is already limited. Weapons, fuel, engineering spaces, crew berthing, and mission equipment compete for every available square foot. Allowing trash to pile up simply isn't an option. Besides taking up valuable storage space, garbage quickly attracts insects, creates unpleasant odors, and increases health risks for the crew. That's why cleanliness isn't just encouraged aboard Navy ships. It's part of daily discipline. Every department shares responsibility for keeping the ship clean. Passageways are swept. Compartments are inspected. Trash is collected throughout the day. Food preparation areas receive constant sanitation. Even the smallest storage spaces are carefully organized. Veteran sailors often say you can judge how well a ship is run simply by how clean it is. A spotless destroyer usually reflects a disciplined crew, but keeping the ship clean involves much more than sweeping floors. Every piece of waste is sorted into specific categories: paper, cardboard, food waste, plastic, metal, glass, hazardous materials, used oil, medical waste, wastewater. Each type follows its own disposal process. Some materials can legally enter the ocean under carefully controlled circumstances. Others are never permitted to leave the ship until reaching a proper disposal facility ashore. These procedures aren't simply Navy policy. They're governed by international law. One of the most important is the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, better known as MARPOL. Established by the International Maritime Organization, MARPOL sets strict global rules governing what ships may and may not discharge into the sea. The U.S. Navy follows these regulations while also complying with its own environmental policies, many of which are even more restrictive. That means every sailor receives training on proper waste handling before deployment. Environmental protection isn't viewed as separate from the mission. It's considered part of it. And because a destroyer doesn't just represent American military power, it also represents American professionalism. And nowhere is that professionalism more obvious than inside one of the busiest places aboard the ship, the galley. Every meal served creates another challenge. Hundreds of hungry sailors, hundreds of dirty trays, and hundreds of pounds of food waste. So, what happens to everything left behind after breakfast, lunch, and dinner? The answer is far more sophisticated than most people imagine. Every day aboard a U.S. Navy destroyer begins long before sunrise. While many sailors are still asleep or standing the midnight watch, the ship's culinary specialists are already hard at work preparing breakfast. Feeding more than 300 sailors is no small task. Over the course of a deployment, the galley serves thousands of meals, producing everything from scrambled eggs and fresh coffee to grilled chicken, pasta, soups, and desserts. Keeping the crew well-fed is essential to maintaining morale and operational readiness. But every meal creates something else. Waste, leftover vegetables, fruit peels, coffee grounds, bones, expired ingredients, uneaten food, disposable packaging from supplies, dirty trays, used cooking oil. Multiply that by 3 meals a day for hundreds of sailors, and the amount of food waste quickly becomes enormous. And simply storing it until the ship reaches port isn't practical. That food waste begins to decompose almost immediately, creating odors and attracting bacteria. Instead, destroyers process food waste as quickly as possible. Inside the ship's galley, sailors separate food scraps from plastics, metal, glass, and paper before disposal. This sorting process is critical because each type of waste follows different environmental regulations. One of the key pieces of equipment used aboard many Navy ships is the food pulper. A pulper grinds food waste into a fine slurry by mixing it with seawater. This process reduces the size of food scraps dramatically, making them easier to handle while preventing large pieces from entering the ocean. However, even after grinding, food waste cannot simply be discharged anywhere. Its disposal is governed by international environmental law. MARPOL, the rules of the sea. Every commercial vessel and every U.S. Navy destroyer operates under environmental regulations known as MARPOL, short for the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships. One section of these regulations, Annex 5, specifically addresses garbage disposal. Contrary to what many people believe, ships are not allowed to dump ordinary trash into the ocean whenever they choose. In fact, plastics are prohibited from being discharged into the sea almost anywhere in the world. Food waste is treated differently when a destroyer is operating a sufficient distance from shore as defined by MARPOL and local operational restrictions permit. Properly processed food waste may be discharged overboard. Grinding the waste into very small particles helps ensure that it breaks down naturally and minimizes environmental impact. The exact distance requirements depend on whether the waste has been processed and whether the ship is operating in specially protected marine areas where even stricter rules apply. Every discharge is carefully controlled. Every procedure is documented. Destroyers don't simply throw leftovers into the water. Environmental compliance is taken extremely seriously. The biggest surprise: plastic never follows the food. If food waste can sometimes be discharged under controlled conditions, plastic absolutely cannot. Plastic is one of the greatest environmental concerns facing modern navies. Plastic bottles, food wrappers, packaging straps, disposable gloves, shrink wrap, storage containers, these materials can remain in the ocean for decades or even centuries. Marine animals often mistake floating plastic for food, making improper disposal a serious environmental hazard. That's why destroyers go to extraordinary lengths to prevent plastic from entering the sea. Throughout the ship, sailors collect plastic separately from every other waste stream. Instead of being discarded, it is transported to specialized processing equipment. One of the most important machines aboard is the trash compactor. These powerful hydraulic compactors compress large quantities of plastic, cardboard, and other dry waste into dense blocks called bales. Compacting dramatically reduces the volume of waste, allowing the ship to store weeks' worth of garbage in limited storage spaces. The tightly compressed bales are wrapped, labeled, and secured until the destroyer returns to port or transfers them to a logistics vessel. Even then, the waste isn't simply discarded. It enters approved recycling or disposal facilities ashore. Nothing is wasted if it can be reused. Efficiency governs almost every aspect of life aboard a destroyer. Whenever possible, reusable containers replace disposable ones. Storage boxes are reused. Shipping materials are repurposed. Cardboard is flattened before compacting to save space. Even used cooking oil is carefully collected in designated containers rather than poured down drains. Every cubic foot of storage saved means more room for spare parts, ammunition, food supplies, or mission equipment. That's why waste reduction begins long before anything reaches the trash compactor. Supply officers and logistics specialists carefully manage deliveries to minimize unnecessary packaging whenever possible. It's a constant balancing act. Enough supplies to sustain the crew for months. But not so much unnecessary material. That valuable storage space disappears. By the end of a long deployment, the crew has processed thousands of pounds of garbage without allowing it to overwhelm the ship. Yet surprisingly, food waste and plastic aren't the most complicated things aboard a destroyer. That title belongs to something every sailor produces every single day: wastewater. Because once more than 300 people begin using showers, sinks, and toilets around the clock, keeping the ship clean becomes a remarkable feat of engineering. If you enjoyed this inside look at life aboard a U.S. Navy destroyer, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments which aspect of life at sea you'd like us to explore next. It's one of those questions almost nobody asks. Yet aboard a destroyer carrying more than 300 sailors, it becomes one of the most important engineering challenges on the entire ship. Every single day, hundreds of toilets are flushed, hundreds of showers are taken, laundry machines run for hours, sinks are used constantly. All of that water has to go somewhere. Unlike a city, a destroyer can't connect to a municipal sewer system. It has to manage everything on board. To understand how this works, you first need to know that not all wastewater is the same. Engineers divide it into two main categories: black water and gray water. Black water is sewage. It comes from toilets and urinals and contains human waste that requires careful handling. Gray water is everything else: water from showers, bathroom sinks, laundry machines, galley sinks. These two systems are managed differently, but both are designed to protect the crew, the ship, and the environment. The ship's hidden plumbing system, hidden behind walls and beneath decks, is an enormous network of pipes, pumps, valves, and holding tanks. Most sailors rarely think about it. They simply flush the toilet. But behind that simple action is an incredibly sophisticated system. Modern destroyers use vacuum-assisted marine sanitation systems rather than the gravity-fed toilets found in most homes. When the flush button is pressed, a powerful vacuum rapidly moves waste through sealed piping toward collection tanks. Using vacuum systems reduces water consumption while helping prevent clogs and odors. It's also far more practical aboard a ship that constantly pitches and rolls in heavy seas. The collected sewage is then stored until it can be processed according to Navy procedures and environmental regulations. Depending on the ship's equipment, location, and mission, treated sewage may be discharged when permitted under applicable regulations, while in other situations it remains stored until disposal is appropriate. Every step follows strict environmental rules. There is no casual dumping. Everything is carefully controlled. Gray water, the water you don't think about. Gray water is produced in surprisingly large quantities. Think about how many times 300 sailors wash their hands every day. Add showers, laundry, cooking, cleaning. The volume quickly reaches thousands of gallons. Although gray water doesn't contain sewage, it still contains soap, detergent, grease, food particles, and other contaminants. Engineering crews continuously monitor these systems to ensure they function properly throughout deployment. Keeping these systems operating is critical. A blocked drain or failed pump isn't just an inconvenience. It can affect sanitation across the entire ship. That's why engineering departments perform routine inspections and preventative maintenance almost every day. Like many shipboard systems, problems are fixed immediately, not next week. If food waste requires careful handling, hazardous waste requires even greater attention. Destroyers are essentially floating industrial facilities. Inside the ship are engines producing tens of thousands of horsepower, hydraulic systems, generators, electrical equipment, helicopter maintenance areas, machine shops, medical spaces. All of these generate materials that could seriously harm the marine environment if improperly discarded. Used motor oil, hydraulic fluid, paint thinner, cleaning solvents, lubricants, batteries, fuel filters, chemical containers, medical waste. None of these can simply be thrown into the ocean. Instead, every category has its own collection procedures. Special containers are clearly labeled. Hazardous materials are stored separately from ordinary garbage. Some require sealed drums. Others require fire-resistant storage lockers. Many are logged and tracked from the moment they're collected until they're transferred ashore. These procedures are followed not only because regulations require them, but because even small spills can create major environmental damage. Used oil is too valuable to waste. One of the most carefully managed materials aboard any destroyer is lubricating oil. The ship's gas turbine engines, reduction gears, pumps, and auxiliary machinery require enormous quantities of specialized lubricants. After use, that oil isn't dumped. It's collected in dedicated storage tanks where it remains until it can be transferred to an approved receiving facility. The same applies to contaminated fuel, oily water mixtures, and many maintenance fluids. Destroyers are equipped with oil-water separation systems designed to prevent petroleum products from entering the ocean. Engineering departments constantly monitor these systems because environmental compliance is considered part of operational readiness. A ship that pollutes isn't simply breaking regulations, it's failing part of its mission. Every sailor plays a role. One surprising fact about destroyer life is that waste management isn't handled by one small team. Everyone participates. Every sailor receives environmental protection training. New personnel quickly learn how to separate waste correctly, where different materials belong, what can never enter ordinary trash, and why every procedure matters. Daily cleaning stations are a long-standing Navy tradition. Departments clean workspaces, inspect equipment, remove accumulated waste, organize storage areas. Senior leaders regularly inspect compartments because cleanliness directly affects safety, morale, and operational effectiveness. Veteran sailors often joke that a clean ship is a happy ship. Behind the humor lies an important truth. A clean destroyer is usually a disciplined destroyer, and discipline keeps crews alive. Even with compactors running around the clock, destroyers can only store so much trash. Eventually, every deployment reaches a point where the ship needs to transfer supplies off the vessel or take on new ones. This is where one of the Navy's most impressive logistical operations comes into play. It's called underway replenishment, or UNREP. And most people think of UNREP as a way to refuel ships at sea, and that's certainly one of its primary functions. But it's also an opportunity to transfer mail, spare parts, food, and in some cases, accumulated waste. During these operations, a fleet replenishment ship sails alongside the destroyer, while both vessels maintain nearly the same speed and course. Heavy lines are passed between the ships, allowing pallets of cargo to move safely across open water. Depending on the mission and logistics plan, compacted waste or recyclable materials may be transferred to support ships equipped to handle them. More commonly, however, destroyers retain much of their compacted solid waste until they return to a suitable port with approved disposal facilities. Every movement is carefully coordinated. Every pallet is tracked because even something as ordinary as trash becomes an important logistical consideration during long deployments. Returning to port. When a destroyer finally arrives in port after weeks or even months at sea, unloading waste becomes one of many carefully organized operations. Compacted plastic, cardboard, metal, glass, hazardous materials, used lubricants, expired supplies, everything that has been stored aboard is transferred to approved shore facilities for recycling, treatment, or disposal. Nothing simply disappears once the ship reaches land. Environmental regulations continue to apply. Hazardous waste follows strict handling procedures. Recyclable materials are separated whenever practical. Even routine garbage disposal involves detailed planning to ensure compliance with both Navy policy and local environmental regulations. For the crew, it's another reminder that keeping a destroyer operational involves much more than weapons and engineering. It requires constant attention to countless small details that most people never notice. Why it all matters. It's easy to think of waste management as one of the least exciting parts of life aboard a warship, but ask any experienced sailor, and they'll tell you something different. A clean ship is a safer ship. Poor sanitation can spread illness. Improperly stored garbage can attract pests, create fire hazards, or interfere with critical equipment. Leaks from hazardous materials can damage machinery and threaten the marine environment. Good housekeeping isn't just about appearance. It's about protecting the crew, maintaining readiness, and ensuring the ship can continue its mission without unnecessary problems. That's why environmental protection has become deeply integrated into modern naval operations. And today's destroyers don't simply defend the oceans, they also operate under some of the world's most comprehensive environmental standards. For many sailors, following these procedures becomes second nature. Sorting waste, conserving water, preventing spills, cleaning workspaces. It's all part of everyday life, just as important as standing watch or maintaining equipment. A destroyer may be designed for combat, but it survives because hundreds of sailors perform countless ordinary jobs with extraordinary discipline. Every meal served creates waste. Every shower produces wastewater. Every repair generates scrap. Every mission leaves behind something that must be managed. The crew doesn't simply fight the enemy, they fight corrosion, limited space, strict environmental regulations, and the constant challenge of keeping a floating city clean. The next time you watch a destroyer slicing across the ocean, remember this: behind every missile launcher, every radar array, and every successful deployment are hundreds of sailors working together to keep the ship running right down to the last bag of trash.